Okay, there may still be people coming in, but let's start this session. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming along. Little bit of protocol for this session. We have the chat box, as you're aware. Do please pop any questions in there as we go along. Keep your mics off in case of background noise from neighbours' dogs or children or whatever, or the drumming of board fingers on your desktop, who knows, but keep the mics off unless we invite some sort of conversation, which we will do later on. I may choose to take your questions live if I have the spare mental capacity, or I may bounce you through to our formal Q&A session later on. So forgive me if that's what happens. Maybe you're asking a question which I'm expecting to answer in due course. Welcome to this session on reference managers. This is the plan for today. We're going to start off. I'm going to introduce myself to you guys because most of you don't know me really. Then we're going to talk a bit about reference managers in general. I'll probably pause and take some questions after that point, and then we'll go into a workshop where I'll go through some software moves and look at some of the issues that you might face and show you some practical examples. That will probably be the most interesting bit. But let's make a start. So first of all, let me just say, referencing is boring. You know that. That's probably why you're here. But the thing is, it's boring, it's time consuming, but there are ways to mitigate that. And that's what these things, reference managers, are all about. They take a lot of the pain away. They almost make it fun sometimes, not quite fun, but they almost make it fun sometimes because you feel like you're being very productive, much more so than agonizing over the semicolon or the comma or the italics in some abstruse reference. So, yeah, we understand that, and that's okay. But hopefully we can make it a bit better. So first of all, as promised, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. My name is Justin Patterson, and I am the Professor of Music Production at London College of Music. I'm an active researcher. I'm just finishing up a role. I've just finished as the Principal Investigator of an AHRC project, the commercialization of interactive music, where we developed a novel app format through which people could release their music and it would sort of automatically remix as they listened on their iPhone. And I also run a currently active project called Happy, Haptic Authoring Pipeline for the Production of Immersive Experiences. It's easier to say Happy. This is about forming abstract visualization of sound in mixed reality using a Microsoft HoloLens, but we use haptic feedback by having prosthetics attached to the hands. You can reach out and you can touch this abstraction of sound, and you can feel its texture, its weight, its malleability, its central gravity, its friction, and you can then manipulate those qualities, and using neural networks and semantic relationships affect the production of a target piece of audio, be that a vocal or a drum loop or an entire mix or a live performance. So that's an ongoing project now with a whole bunch of partners, people like Science Museum and a movie special effects company, and that's funded by the UK. So that's a little bit about me. So let's get into the main meat of the session, which is the more interest to me, which is the reference managers. What we're going to cover today is we're going to look at the concept of these things, a couple of examples, RefWorks and Zotero. I'm mostly going to focus on Zotero, but I'm going to tell you a bit about RefWorks because the university provides that. I'm assuming that you guys don't know that much about these things yet, which is why you're here. But we'll talk about why we bother with these, and I'll briefly discuss a few of the options as well. So this will lead up to a practical workshop with hopefully some power user hints and moves that will greatly tighten up your work and save you lots of time in the future, I hope. So we'll start off with a bit of general concept about these things. Now the idea is that you have, you know this because you're PhD students, you have a bunch of research sources. And you want to get those ultimately into your thesis. But you might also want to get them into some articles. Maybe you're publishing en route towards your final doctorate. Hopefully you are. Now, if you attempt to go from your research sources to the articles, or indeed to your thesis, manually, it's horrible. It takes forever. You know this perhaps. Commas, semicolons, italices, different formats for every type of source that you want to cite. It's very long. And it's also very, very haphazard. Doing this for one particular journal outlet might work one way, but they need a different format for a different journal, or for indeed your university submissions, all these different referencing formats. More on that later. So really the best way is if we can have a solution that allows us to get from here into a database with one click, or as few clicks as possible. And then with one click, or as few as possible, from the database either to your final thesis or to your articles. That's the idea, but it's all about having this database. Now, if you can make this happen, then a couple of things will be the case. You will be very accurate and organized, and those things add together to give you productivity. And that's what we want. We want to be time efficient, and that's where reference managers come in. They give you accuracy, organization, and time efficiency, and that makes you work better. So, why else should we bother with these things? Actually, there's a whole bunch of specific reasons why we should do this. And although we're going to talk about Zotero and a little bit of RefWorks, understand that there's a whole bunch of solutions to this and to this problem. There's a number of bits of software out there, and we will mention there's one called Reference Manager, which is a reference manager. It's something like saying I'm going to hoover the carpet. Hoover is a brand of vacuum cleaner, but you don't necessarily say vacuum the carpet. Some people say hoover like it's a verb. So anyway, twittering on. So let's think about why we bother with these things. So first of all, it allows you to build and share a personal library of resources. Now this, of course, to any PhD student or researcher is fantastically important. Building this library is something which is ongoing. It's something which you will engage with throughout your studies, but probably you will then carry on throughout your professional life. And that library will get bigger and bigger and bigger, and harder to organize, manage. And that's why you need certain tools and approaches within that library to manage that. Sharing the library is fantastically important. Very often research is carried out in teams, and if you use a reference manager, many of them, at least many of the types, allow you to share. In other words, two people can both be adding references into a shared resource area, and then you can both access those. So you don't need to be doing the same thing twice, and you can benefit from each other's activities in real time if you're writing a document together. And that can apply to when you're publishing with your supervisor, or perhaps later on you're part of an active research team. So yeah, it's about an ongoing database that will empower you more and more and more in your research. Now, what some people do when they're writing stuff, because referencing is so cumbersome, is they'll write some text and then they'll open up some square brackets and put REF into those, meaning go back and find the reference later. You know there's something, you can add it later on, but you've no time to dig around right now. If you have a really time-efficient way of inserting those references, a reference manager, and this is not a citation generator, I'll mention that again in a minute, not a citation generator, that's different, then it doesn't break your train of thought. You can work quickly, you can carry on doing your stuff, and you can see a more complete version of your text forming in front of your eyes, not just in terms of the in-text citation, but also you see the reference list growing. And there's even ways to map that, which we'll talk about briefly later on. So that's very important. Since I mentioned the citation generator, let's just clear that one up. Now, there's a thing in many word processors that has gone back several versions, and it might be a little square box that says Harvard or APA or something. And you click on that and it will give you a sort of vanilla flavored Harvard reference that you can paste into your reference list at the end. The word vanilla is quite important here. Or you can go into Google and there's any number of websites that will produce a citation which you can grab and paste in. We're not talking about those things at all. We're talking about something with which you can manage your resources, something organized, something shareable, as I said. So it's very important to make a distinction, just in case any of you are wedded to those sorts of systems, which are really a little bit primitive and cumbersome. Now, there's a caveat that if you go into Word online via the University OneDrive system, for instance, you will see links to the university-approved reference manager system already. That's not the thing I'm talking about. That's a reference manager. But we'll come back to that specifically later. Okay, so moving on for now. These things automatically build a reference list and or bibliography for you. Just to be specific, reference list, a list of things you have cited in your text. Citing includes allusion to an idea or including a quotation, if those are citations, of course. And the bibliography is a list of sources to which you have referred, sources which have informed your thinking, but you've not explicitly cited. And those will typically come in two separate lists in your final submission of any article or thesis. Two lists, not multiple lists with different kinds of media, just the two. A reference manager will construct this thing automatically and take a lot of the pain away. Now, many of you know that the university uses, I guess you all know, the PhD students, forgive me, we use a variant of the Harvard system. This is an alphabetical system based around authors and dates in the main text. Now, if you're revising an article and you want to put a new citation in partway through, then what will happen is you then have to go into, if you're doing it manually, you have to go into your reference list and you have to go down looking for it alphabetically, where do I put this thing in, and oh yes, it's between this guy and this guy, and you pop it in there. It's not too bad. If you're using a more scientific style with numbers and square brackets, there's a few different kinds that go under that sort of format. Things become a bit more complex because the numbers, in case you don't know, the numbers go sequentially as you cite things. So the first reference in your text is number 1, the second is number 2, the third is number 3, etc. If you've got 60 and then you put one in your introduction, say a new number 3, then everything else needs to get 1 added to it. So you have to go through all the numbers and add 1 to them, then go through your reference list and add 1 to those as well. Whoa, it is a nightmare if you're using one of those systems manually. It's not fun. The reference manager does it with 1 click. That's one of the most powerful things about it. So, let's see if I'm in there. Yeah. You can also insert your own searchable meta tags. By that, I mean that you can put things like great or molecular structure or survey management or must read sometime, anything you like. You can associate those with particular references and you can search according to those. And you can set up relational databases according to similar tagging as well. Very, very powerful for organizing things over years of work. So that's a very useful thing as well. You can also annotate documents. You can embed PDFs in these things and insert annotations and manage and search those annotations. It's really cool to be able to search those annotations on your own. Of course, it's all kinds of productivity tools, things like OneNote that allows you to do variants in this, but we're talking about a hybridized, integrated environment here. And that's something that reference managers will facilitate as well. I mentioned the Harvard author date thing, the numbers to square brackets things, but with reference manager, you can actually move between them. Let's suppose you're compiling a chapter for your doctorate and you're using the Harvard cite and write referencing style, but you come upon a publication outlet and you think my chapter is tailor-made for that, I can convert it into a journal article, I'll be unbeatable at Viva once I'm through peer review. It's going to be great, I'll do that. Then you look at it and it's not quite the same format. That can be really bad in one of a couple of ways. If it's a very similar sort of format, like a different variant of Harvard, and there's lots, or say something like Chicago, which is also an author date thing, but with different punctuation, etc., that's really fiddly to migrate. Or worse still, if you go to numbers and square brackets, trying to go between author dates and numerical style, or vice versa, is just long. It takes days, and you always make mistakes. Talking of mistakes, I'll tell you a little bit about how I came to be asked to do these sessions. I sit on a committee called ERDSEC. ERDSEC, as you might be aware, is where you submit your applications to register to, and it also proves your MPhil transfers. And there's a whole bunch of the great and the good from around the university, different subjects, who scrutinise these submissions from PhD students. And for some reason, I find myself being the guy who always sits there going, but hang on, the referencing is not right in this one. There's some errors. And I've become a bit of a laughingstock in the committee because they almost expect me to point this out. The thing is that once you get used to these things, they do jump out at you. They leap off the page, any inconsistencies. I don't know why that is. And you can kind of think, well, so this guy's a pedant. Well, I am, but I promise you that if you're submitting to a quarter decent journal, they're going to be a lot more pedantic. Every comma, every semicolon, they are going to be all over you about those revisions. And if you have some bulletproof way of addressing that up front, then it will take a whole layer of revision pain away, and possibly even include a potential rejection if the scale of the errors winds up the reviewer to a particular degree. So it's good to be pedantic about this because it's the real academic world. So yeah, these are on the right, my right here. That's my right. Probably it's not my left to you. That's the mirroring of the screen. I don't know. There's other things. You can work more quickly with your supervision team, with your team of supervisors, with future researchers you work with, as I said, but also it will help you with submissions to ERDSEC and future journals. Very important. So here is a useful link for you guys. Now, we're not meant to Wikipedia, are we? But there's a rather good site just here. Let me show you it. I need to go to here. This is a rather good site. I will drop this URL into the chat, just so you've got it for yourselves. There we go, it's come through. And this gives you a comparison of the many, many different reference managers that are out there. Mendeley is a popular one. Reference Manager, the one with the name that's the same as the thing. RefWorks, the one that the university provides you. Zotero, the one that I use. So this is quite a useful page to have a look at the features and, importantly, the price points of these things. Because actually, this is pretty important to understand the differences in making your choice of investing a lot of time and possibly a lot of money into these things. Now, I've alluded to this a couple of times. There's a lot of confusion around this, sadly. A lot of academic staff even say, ah, yes, at UWL, we use the Harvard form of referencing. No, we don't. We don't. We use a variant of the Harvard form of referencing. That variant is prescribed centrally in the university. It's advertised on the library website. It's defined and managed by Palgrave and Macmillan. And it's a book. It's called Cite Them Right, and there's an accompanying website. Now, I make that distinction because there are many, many, many subtly different variants of Harvard, the author date system. We use Cite Them Right. So let's just clarify that. There's a website for Cite Them Right, which I don't propose to engage in too extensively, but it is very, very important that you familiarise yourself with it. Let's just have a quick look at it. It's available via the library website, and when you go there, I wonder if it will let me refresh this page. Yes, it will. When you navigate to it, you normally see some authentication. Here's the Easy Proxy service. I have to go in, and at this point, as I go in here, the university is paying for my access. If you Google Cite Them Right, you will see a vignette of this website. You will see a hint of how good they want you to think it is, but it will not give you all the detail. There's a huge amount of detail here from on the homepage, and forgive me if this is all cat to you, but I'm going to just refer to this later, so I might as well be explicit about it now. From the homepage where we have the easy soft start videos and various sort of basic approaches, through to section by section ways to refer to different books. Something that I'm going to come back to quite a few times are chapters and multi-volume works, because this is one of the things that people fall down in so often in applications to the register, MPhil transfers, and even final doctorates. The number of times I see people citing edited books, mentioning the editor, That's not what Cite Them Right asks us to do. If you click on that link there, which I'm not going to do, but if you click on that one, you will find you need to cite the shooter often. And this has profound ramifications for the reference managing approach as well, because sometimes we need a bit of extra work. Now, I mentioned that at university, we tend to use Cite Them Right. If any of you currently here are from law or psychology, then you will be using OSCLA or APA respectively. But I think that pretty much everyone else in UWL uses Cite Them Right, as do many other universities. But there's many, many, many other referencing styles as well. But for the moment, we're just going to confine ourselves to Cite Them Right. If there's any of you guys do psychology or law, you can just simply migrate all of the stuff that I'm saying to those particular formats, and it all applies just the same. And guess what? In a reference manager, it's one click from doing that. So it's really not a massive problem. Now, RefWorks is something that the university provides you with. It pays for it, and RefWorks is brilliant. It's based in the cloud, so you can access it anywhere from any device. All your stuff is kept up there, and it's effectively free to you for the duration of your studies. It integrates into university systems very well. If you go into, as I mentioned, a OneDrive-based Word document, you will see a little RCM tab up there, which is the RefWorks integration into that word processor. Very nice, very handy to have that. RefWorks works well with our ebook system. Of course, we're using those things more than ever in these crazy pandemic times. And that's nice because the university has our sort of integrated approach to those. You find ways of linking those things up. And ProQuest, the company that makes RefWorks, it is well, they have quite I don't know, let me start that again, sorry, I got my words muddled. The subscription is quite hefty. If you look at the ProQuest website, at least last time I did, I couldn't even see how much an individual subscription was for that service. They seem to really aim at institutions. So I presume by that it's really expensive for an institution to buy it and then offer this facility to your good selves. But there are some implications of that. One is that that money goes into keeping it very current. Now, it just so happens that Cite Them Right, for instance, they kind of update stuff. They're a bit naughty about this. It's kind of pretty annoying. They change something in the formatting. Over the lifespan of a PhD, you can almost guarantee that some nuances, some details in the formatting will be different by the time you finish. And they don't tell you. They don't give you a changelog. Now, RefWorks is pretty good at keeping on top of things. Other solutions, for instance, the open source Zotero, I'll be talking about in a minute, are not so good because it depends on people giving them their time kind of for free. So RefWorks is great, but there is a problem. The university pays for the subscription, but when you complete your studies with the university, you leave. You no longer have the subscription unless you start paying yourself to that same organization. And as I said, I couldn't even find, at least not easily, I didn't dig around too hard, couldn't even find how much it was for an individual subscription. So who knows? Now, they say, but you can export all your references. Yes, you can export your references in a list that can be imported into other systems should you wish to go with a different system in the future. But you cannot export all the PDFs that maybe you've embedded in that reference manager and meta tagged. You can't export all the relational links between them. You can't export all the notes that you embedded in them. Not without doing all this stuff manually, which for a reference list that's this long after a PhD is nightmarish. So yes, you can, but you will lose stuff. You will have to plan and invest in time in order to do that. And I hate to go against the party line because this is a great system, but it is potentially a disadvantage for students who are here for, in the case of a full-time PhD, 3 years or something. Of course, for academic staff, then that's great. Staff will typically, hopefully, be here for a bit longer than 3 years. But it's not inconceivable. You could move between institutions, and different institutions will have different systems, so they could run into the same problems as well. So Q, another option, that of the freeware Zotero. This is open source, so it's made from code libraries that are written by third parties or something. So that means that you can download it for free. Now, I say free-ish because, as I will show you in just a moment, there are some pay plans which sort of become necessary. It has a slightly fiddly installation because, well, if you install it as an app on your device, then it's slightly fiddly. It can be slightly fiddly, but I'm going to talk you through that just to sort of demystify that, just to make it seem doable, should you wish to. Now, it's cloud assisted, so you don't have to install that app, but it syncs to the cloud. This facilitates not just a backup for all your stuff, but group collaboration, because the cloud acts as a nexus for different people's apps to access shared group libraries, collections, as they call them in Zotero. Now, unlike RefWorks, because this is a third-party thing, it's a little bit lumpy for ebooks. That text is often protected because of publishers' copyright restrictions. You know, when you get a PDF, it's only available in a reading device, not just in a generic PDF reader where you can lift text out of it. So you can run into a few bits of bother there with Zotero. And because it's dependent on people's goodwill, as I mentioned, being open source, it has some currency issues. Sometimes this thing will update a bit, and this thing takes a while to catch up. I personally have written to Zotero a number of times with updates to ask them to implement it, and I've also written some scripts for the Zotero Styles Manager. More about that later. Yes, that makes it sound a little bit amateur. No, it just is open source. But guess what? You can take it with you. You can take it with you. It's yours. So it doesn't matter if you're going to finish your PhD and go somewhere else. Your references will all stay intact, as will the meta tags, as will the PDFs, as will the annotations, all that stuff. That's a pretty major plus point, and for that reason, I certainly use it. Charlotte, you have a question. Go for it.
Hi there. Yeah, maybe I should ask a bit later, but just while you're talking about Zotero.
Yeah.
You mentioned before that you were talking about not interrupting the flow as you're writing something, and how you could, you're writing a sentence or two, and you put a bracket and put something that's quick so that you can carry on finishing your sentence. I think that's what I got that you were saying. I don't really know that that option or how that works, so I just want to check if I'm jumping ahead and you're going to talk about that, or if that's available in Zotero, or is there going to be space?
No. Let me clarify. It's a really good point, and I probably didn't articulate it very well. I'm talking about a purely manual system for when you're focused on writing, and you're writing away, and you know that you're referring to a point that you've read somewhere, and you can't quite remember the name of the article or the author or something. You think, oh, I'll find it later. But you want to remind yourself to insert that reference later on. What people often do is write something that sticks out the text. They might do a whole bunch of question marks. So they might do square brackets REF, which they can then search for in the search facility of the word processor and check later on. It's a purely manual mnemonic type thing, Charlotte. And it's a style that I was certainly very familiar with a few years ago before reference managers were so prolific. It was very common for people to add the references retrospectively. So no, it's not any sort of automated clever thing. It's just a way of reminding yourself to go back and sort it out later. Does that clarify?
Okay, so you're saying, you're saying that that's what people tend to do, is like I do asterisks and just to be like, okay, come back to that. But what you're saying is that if you've organized, or if you're using a referencing software, then and everything's in there, you might be able to put, for example, asterisk, post-structuralism or something, and then you can look in your referencing software for that, and then it's just going to be easier to find later on.
Let me draw you away from asterisks with the workshop that we'll do very soon, and you probably won't need them that often anymore once you see the way it can work, I hope.
Okay, thanks. So we couldn't tell what you were pointing at, but I'll be patient.
Ping me again when we get to that bit if you want to follow up on your point. But I'm hoping that will become slightly clearer later on. So I said this thing is free-ish. Let me explain what I mean by free-ish. I have here the Zotero price plan. Now, we have storage limits. Now, just storing references takes hardly any space at all. We're talking about just bytes to have an individual reference. What takes up space are PDFs. And actually, I found I managed very well with the free 300 megs for a long, long time until I started collaborating. And when I collaborated with people at different institutions, and we started wanting to pool our PDFs, and typically, of course, you have many more potential sources of information and PDFs than you might even refer to in text. That was when I felt the need to go over the 300 meg limit, and that's where I had to take the brutal decision to shell out $20 a year. But if you choose not to use the PDF type facilities, you can pretty much use this thing for free forever. As you can see, if you need more than that, there's a sliding scale of price plans. Like so many digital companies, they all want a piece of your income every month. And it doesn't half add up. You know, we know that from the Apple Music plus the broadband plus the whatever else it is you have. This is one more thing, but you can manage on the free. I personally, I guess because I'm an academic, you know, it was worth my while paying for this. But for reasons previously outlined, I didn't want to use the free university system. So I said the installation was a little fiddly. Let me take you through it. The first thing you have to do is install an app, and then you have to install something to connect that app to your browser. The reason is your browser is where you will harvest metadata to populate the reference manager. I'm going to explain this in more detail very, very soon. The metadata exists in places like Amazon, in places like Google Books. You expect to see the name of the author, the year it was published, the name of the publisher. All that stuff is there if you think about those pages. You often disregard it. But what the reference manager can do is pluck that metadata out of the website in which it resides and put it into its database. So we need a connector to join the browser to reference manager. Then, to get the information from the database to the documents that you're working with, we have to install a plugin. Think about that little diagram I had down here with the sources to the database, then down to articles or to your thesis. You know, it's about communication between those different stages of your work. So we need to put a plugin for Word. Now I mentioned the RCM one was already in the OneDrive version of Word because the university paid for that, but you need to install this third-party thing for Word separately. Now here's the thing, you can install it for different browsers, for Chrome, for Safari, for Firefox, which I use, for Microsoft thingy, forget what it's called now, I'm a Mac guy. You can install plugins for LibreOffice and Word and possibly something else, but you cannot do it for Pages. Sorry, Pages people. The problem is that Apple has a very, very tight fence around the software, and they will not let third-party people get into their code base and mess with it and tweak it and customize it. They just don't like that. So unfortunately, you can't use these systems with Pages. Now, RefWorks advertising says, yes, you can. You can use this with Pages. No, you can't. What you can do with RefWorks is you can copy a monolithic text and you can stick it into the appropriate place that's called your reference list in Pages. And it's static. It's not dynamic. It will not update as you add stuff. You have to delete it and paste it again. And if you change stuff again, delete it and paste it again. Most of them, well, all the reference managers will allow you to do that, and RefWorks actually trades in that, which is a little bit naughty because it's not really compatible at all. As you will see in just a couple of minutes, the dynamic management of references within something like Word is a completely different ballgame. And Pages devotees, I'm really sorry to tell you, but if you're engaged in writing a large body of academic literature, as you all are, it's actually worth migrating to, let's say, Word, which is free from the university, just to get the benefit, the productivity benefits of a reference manager. And then if you want to do formatting in Pages, paste it all in and make it pretty before submission. But dynamic reference management in a friendly word processor is a massively important part of all this. So the next thing there is something which I love saying, Zotfile. It's a funny word, isn't it? Zotfile. This is completely optional. There's a whole bunch of plugins. The plugin for Word is a third-party thingy, utility, bit of software that allows you to talk to that word processor. But there are several dozen plugins for Zotero. That's the nature of open source stuff. That's why it's so good. People keep adding new feature sets. And Zotfile is a really cool one, which I'll demonstrate to you later on, which is wonderful for extracting highlights of PDFs and adding your own annotations. But that's optional, you don't have to have it at all. You need to install the Cite and Write style. Zotero ships with a number of reference styles already inbuilt, but we will have to install a particular one to talk the university standard of Cite and Write. And lastly, I strongly recommend setting the so-called classic view. So yeah, I said it was fiddly. There's several stages to that, but they're really not that bad. Let me just demonstrate, well, not demonstrate, but just take you through how these work. So the first thing is, I thought I'd have prepared for this, but I've gone and deleted it by accident. Let's just go Zotero, type it into Google, and look at that. Download for Mac, if you're a Windows guy there, or even Linux. So that's easy. That downloads the app. This is all independent of the cloud-based version, of course. The next thing that I said you to do, excuse me, was install the connector for your browser. So you can see there that it's advertising the Firefox one. Just click that, it will install it. But if you've got another browser, you go there and it will install it. The next thing I said is you need to install a plugin to talk to Word or your preferred browser. And so clicking there, you can browse the plugins. So this is actually one click plus a couple of OKs. This is one click plus a couple of OKs. This, I've got that window open here, looks like that. Now this is where it gets a little bit scary, because suddenly in your plugins, you've got loads of them. And you go, oh, what do they all do? But actually the one that you need, if you just be patient and you scroll all the way down, here we go. Oops, here we go. Sorry, right clicking, trying to make it bigger. Zotero Word Processor plugins. That's the thing that will help you out with Word, LibreOffice, and that was the other one I forgot, Google Docs. This is friendly to Google Docs, which many people like. So you need to install that. Once you've done those 3 installs, it will work, which is nice. There are other things, as I mentioned, the strange thing Zotfile. There it is. And as you can see, Zotero plugin to automatically rename, move, attach PDFs or other files to Zotero items, and it does more than that. I'll tell you about Zotfile in a little while. In fact, let me just tell you about the installation of Zotfile now, because it's a bit naughty in Firefox. You immediately want to go to that download thing there. And let me just do this. Get my mouse highlighter on. You immediately want to go to the download button and click it. But in fact, it's not as simple as that. I was clicking and it wasn't working. If I hover over it, it says in Firefox, download file with right click, save link as. Oh, who would think of doing that? So it's a little bit naughty in that regard. So you've just got to be a little bit careful. As I said, it is a little bit fiddly. So going back to this thing, so we've installed the app, we've installed the browser connector, we've installed the plugin for Word, you've maybe done Zotfile if you fancy it. Install the Cite then Write style. Now for that, we need to go back to the styles repository. Now this is quite interesting because in the Zotero styles repository, we have all the different referencing styles. There's a lot of them. Have a look at this. That's how many referencing styles there are out there. I'm scrolling quite fast. Oh, I've just got to B. There's a lot. There must be thousands of them. Now, we mentioned Harvard as something which concerns us in the university. So if we narrow this down, type HRD, of course, here's the various Harvards that are out there. There's a lot of Harvards. We used to have our own UWL one down there somewhere, but it's no longer there because we've superseded it with Cite and Write. But you don't even have to navigate that list, because if you simply type CITE, you will find very quickly. Sorry, I'm jumping off it because of my colourful mouse. Then let me just get out of here. You will find Cite and Write 10th, Cite and Write 10th edition Harvard, and you just click on that and it will install. If you're writing for a journal that has a different style, one that I'm going to refer to later on is the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers. You would just find the IEEE one, click on that, and it's installed. And then Zotero speaks that language. So, as I said, fiddly, but not difficult if you know what to do. You can also access this thing from within the preferences of Zotero, by the way. So, let's have a quick look at Zotero. Zotero is here. Actually looks like a great big database. There's a whole bunch of references and there's a whole bunch of folders. Those are my so-called collections, themed references. And Diego, in case you're wondering, that's you. No, it's not. It's a different Diego. That's the author of a book chapter that I edited. So not you, mate. Yes, so I mentioned back in the presentation, the last thing to do was classic view. I'll show you how to do classic view in just a moment. But I think the first thing to do right now is to have a dip into the broad architecture of this thing and then hopefully immediately convert you all to this mode of working by showing you it in action. Not just a slurp of water. I'm going to bring a little thumbnail of me down, some sort of segueing. In fact, no, I am segueing into demonstration mode, but oops, that. I think this is a good moment to pause and take any questions if anyone has any. Does anyone care to ask a question? Where's my chat going? Ahmad, what's up?
Hi, Justin. Thanks for this. So I also have OpenOffice, and I can see there is a support for Libre. Is it called? Is it okay,
yeah.
Or do you prefer? Yeah. You think Microsoft is better?
I think OpenOffice is fine. LibreOffice is the new name for OpenOffice, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. No, and that I just found out because I was downloading the Zotero and I saw the support there, so I was thinking maybe I can just use that way instead of getting
I think you can.
Word.
Yeah, right. I think it's work. I've not used this system within that system. I've occasionally used OpenOffice, LibreOffice for things, but I've not done any referencing in it. But I'm led to believe it works. It's certainly supported. And by the way, talking of support, there are some rather wonderful tutorial videos and fora on using Zotero and busting problems. So if you search the fora, you can very often find the solution to the problem. And there's a wonderful guy called Adam Smith, not the Adam Smith, some modern day Adam Smith, who's very, very helpful in solving the problems. I've seen people hitting him with problems and he goes, "That's interesting, I'll write you some code, let me know how it works tomorrow," and it appears overnight. I mean, it really is fantastic support. So yeah, I've no reason to doubt that it works, Hamad.
Thank you.
Anything else before we move on? Okay, I've just noticed the time, and I am running a little bit behind after that 10-minute delay we had at the beginning with migrating. So let's charge on and see where we get to. Yeah, let's charge on. So we have a list of references here. Now, how did these things get here? Well, the answer is I've imported these from a source online that has metadata, something like Amazon, something like Google Books. And I store these things in so-called my library. Let me just go back to mousey pointy thing so I can point with this. I store this in my library there, and this has everything. But things are also duplicated in all these folders here. These folders are called collections, which are typically themed to do with particular projects you're working on. For instance, there's a paper I was working on with this chap called Bill, and those were the references that Bill and I used in that. You can see all these different names. Then down here are group libraries. You can see that Bill's JAES paper actually had its own library, which Bill and the other author used. There's my happy project I mentioned at the beginning. Here's a list of resources I share with my research assistant. We can both update that and we can both see all those things themed into things like intellectual property, for instance. So that's very useful. These things synchronize on the cloud in almost real time. Very, very handy. Now, how do you get things into my library? Let's go to the browser. Firefox for this. So first of all, let's try Amazon. So here's Amazon. Now, if we go to Amazon Books, which is a good place to go, we like books, and we'll find a book that is on something like, let's say, survey methodology. Let's see what it throws up about survey methodologies. Okay, so all kinds of things here. Indigenous research methodologies. That sounds interesting. Let's click on that. Now, this isn't a book I know. Let's just have a quick look inside. I'm just interested. That's what I wanted to see. Great, so we'll close that off. Now, when you install the connector for your browser, what happens is you get a little icon up there, which is a little blue square in the case of a book. And this will save the metadata from this Amazon entry into Zotero. So let's just set up a custom collection for our demonstration purposes today. So we can go back to Zotero, I'm going to go along here and create a new collection and go demo. So there's a new collection called demo. So any new reference that I harvest will appear not only in demo, but also in the greater my library. But it will start in demo in the first instance. So I'm now going to click this little blue thing here and watch what happens. It says it's saving straight into that folder. I could have overwritten that and saved it somewhere else. And that's great. Now, if we then switch back to Zotero, we will see that thing having been imported, and there it is there. And if we look over here, we can see that Zotero is identified as a book. It's got its title, it's got the author, it's got the edition, the place of publication, the date of publication. Happens to mention this info came from Amazon on this particular date. So it's extracted a whole bunch of metadata. So that was easy, wasn't it? But it gets better. So let's suppose you're writing your article. So I'm going to switch to Word. Here's a Word document. Now, because I've installed the Zotero plugin for Word, remember we installed the Zotero plugin for Word, I've got this menu here. And that one gives me some Zotero options. Adding text and citation, adding a bibliography. It calls it the bibliography because it's American. It means a reference list. These words have slightly different meanings in different geolocations. As I said, we refer to a reference list as one thing and a bibliography as other. It refers to both as the same thing. Then there are some other stuff, preferences and so forth. Notice also that Word has shipped with RCM. This is RefWorks, which I'm not going to demonstrate right now, but you are absolutely welcome to use this venerable system should you wish. So supposing we are writing some texts, and I'll put some text, then we'll put in a citation. Surveys can reveal lots of interesting data. Now we want to add a citation. So what I'm going to do is click that button up there, add edit a citation. And what happens is the first time only we do this for a document, Zotero hits us with this. Only the first time for a given document. These are all the styles that I currently have installed in my version of Zotero. But because I went to the styles repository and asked for the Cite Them Right 10th edition, which is a Harvard, I've got that there. So the first time and the first time only, I select that, and then Zotero knows not to work in IEEE, for instance. So let's go with that and say, OK. And now what Zotero does really annoys me. It does this. What was that? Well, it's a little search bar. It's saying, what is it you're looking for? Type something. And I'm thinking now, oh God, what's the name of it? And I'm not really sure. Well, if I'm not sure, if I do know the name, I can just start typing it there. If, for instance, I knew it was by a guy called Kearney, I could type K-E-A-R-N, and then it's got a whole bunch of things by Gavin Kearney. I just happen to know I have a whole bunch of his papers here. But if I don't know that, it's a problem. So what I can do is go to that tiny little disclosure triangle there and say, go for Classic View, please. And Classic View now presents me with a facsimile of the browser. Notice we have a Zotero within a Zotero. This window here, defined by that boundary, is something that's actually happening inside the word processor. It's just sort of on top of Word, if you like, because the original Zotero is still in the background there. But if we're using that, I could now say, yes, it's that one there, because it's now very obvious in my demo collection. And I could choose other things, like if I was going to cite multiple sources, I could choose that. That gives us the option of adding other sources that will then be clustered correctly according to cite them right style. If we're using a quotation, then I could add the quotation there. And if you're using the author's name in the text, you could suppress the author's name in the reference, which of course complies with the cite and right style. Don't use the author's name in the reference if we've already mentioned it in the text. Take note of that. So I'm not going to bother with those fancy things now. I'm just going to say, OK. And there we go. Julissa 2020. That's nice. They added it. But I don't want that song and dance every time I add a reference. So I said part of the fiddling is classic cue every time. So let's go back to the main Zotero app, and I'm going to get the preferences up. So here are the Zotero preferences. And it has several pull-down menus. And in the one called Cite, we have a tab called Word Processors. And in that, I'm going to say Use Classic Add Citation Dialog. I'm going to tick that. That misses out that horrible red bar where you have to know what you're looking for, and it misses out the horrible disclosure triangle and takes us directly to a facsimile of this window each time. So let's go back to our document. So there's one reference. Now, further down at the end of your document, you have something called this is your reference list. And in bold, because it's a heading, and now we want to add or edit our bibliography. Here's the fun bit. Watch this. Click. So it's all beautifully formatted. Every comma, every italicization, every colon in the correct place. That's a hint of the power of the reference manager. But it doesn't stop there. So what shall I do now? Some random text. Some people think that it is actually good fun to collect data. Let's supposing that is a quotation. Now we're going to add a different reference here. And I could go up to here and click that thing again. But there's a cool thing that we can do. And that is in Word, and my dual screens aren't set up for this, but if I go to the main menu of Word, that's not this menu, that's the menu that's on my second monitor, and I go for the option under the Tools menu called Customize Keyboard. In fact, I'll put that in here as a little annotation. Word/cap tools/cap customize cap keyboard. Dictation error. It doesn't like the whirring of my fan running all this video software. That's where I'm navigating Word, which is off screen to you guys, nothing to do with references. I can get a window, which I think I can drag down and show you. There we go. You can see that now. And in this window, down at the bottom, oh no, sorry, I have to go to macros first. Macros, down at the bottom, we get Zotero. And look, Zotero insert citation. And I put in a custom key command there of command plus option plus control, 3 modifiers, plus I for insert. I can remove that actually. Remove it, and then just add it again. This is how you add one in. You click in there, press new keyboard shortcut, just type that, and you've got a sign. And that's cool, because once we've done that, I don't need to mess around with that button anymore. All I need to do, and this is going towards Charlotte's point of it starts getting quick, and I'm going to hit my key command, and this happens. I've got my Zotero browser window. It's flown up at me with a rather strange magnification for whatever reason. Let me just try that again. I think this is a dual monitor thing moving between the monitors. Yeah, there we go. It's just a 2 monitor thing, that crazy graphics thing. So now let's do a search. We'll go back into my library and I'll find some other random reference. What was that great thing I was reading to do with surveys? I read something about surveys. What was it? Oh, yeah, it was the Handbook of Survey Research. See, I didn't have to remember that it was by Marsden Wright. I just thought, oh, Handbook of Survey Research. Let's cite that now. That's good. So you can see that I used a search bar in Zotero, and immediately I was winning. I only had to get as close as the word surveys, and now I can add another reference. And watch what happens. Fast as you like, it's added Marsden right, and it's extended my reference list. And guess what? It will reorder this alphabetically as well. It just so happened that Marsden came in after Chulita, but had it been before, it would have reordered this. So you can see that we're starting to move very, very fast. But actually, I did that wrong, because if I had a quotation there, then I should have had a page number here. Of course, this is hypothetical. I don't have a page number. But let's delete that reference, and we'll add the page number. Notice what's happened. I deleted it, but it's still there. That's because if you click on it, you can see in any of these things, they're grey. That means it's dynamic text. That means Zotero is in charge of that text. It won't update the reference list until you ask it to. It will update it anytime you add another reference, or if you hit the refresh button there, for instance, like that. It's now got rid of the spurious reference. But let's add Marsden right back, but with a page number this time, because that's appropriate, assuming that is a valid quotation. So we'll add this. Oops, sorry. No, we'll hit our key commands. Pardon me. We'll get search for Marsden, and right, there we go. And this time we will add a page number. And let's suppose we can find it on page 55. Watch what happens. Added page 55 there. Fantastic. And it's done this. It's done p dot space. You would not believe how many applications to register I've seen where there's sometimes a space there, sometimes not. Oh yeah, it's so fiddly getting that stuff right. It's much easier just to rely on these systems to nail it for us. So you can see that we're starting to win with the system, and that's really cool. But there's more. So let's supposing we've done Amazon. Let's supposing you're in Google Books. Google Books. Let's find a book on experimental methodology. Google Books is going to find us a random book on experimental methodology, and let's supposing it's that one there. If I click on that, guess what? We can see where that term came up in the book, which is possibly helpful. But we also get that little import icon there, and we can now import it, which is great. It's going into demo. If we have a look in Zotero, we will see that we have got experimental methodology with all that metadata. So we're winning. It looks like it's all working, but it doesn't always work just as well as we hope, unfortunately. So I'm going to go through a few instances of when you have to mediate to make this fabulous tool work really, really well for you, because most of the time it will work, but sometimes you have to mess around with it. So let's look at an example of that. Going back to Amazon, where I was, Amazon. Now there's a book that I happen to know plays games. Management Bible. Stefan will probably know this book. Have a slurp of water, excuse me. Look at that, the Music Management Bible. Let's click on it. Oh, in fact, that's a Kindle edition. I don't think I wanted a Kindle edition. Oh, there's a paperback link there. Let's go for that. Yes, Music Management Bible, New Revised Edition, paperback. Excellent. Look very carefully at the name of that book. Look very carefully at that. It's gone a bit fuzzy as I zoom. Compiled and edited by Nicola Ritchie's. Okay. That's important. It's going into demo. We'll now insert it into here. Music management encapsulates all of these approaches. So let's insert our Music Management Bible. Hit the key command, go to our demo folder. There's the Music Management Bible. Let's bang it in. And look what we've got. Ritchie's 2012. Ritchie's and ed. Okay, that's good. It detected that Nicola Ritchie's was the editor. That's really helpful. And it said Music Management Bible New Revised Edition. Hang on, that wasn't the title of the book, was it? The title of the book was The Music Management Bible, with a sort of subheading. So what's going on? Well, the thing is, Amazon's metadata is wrong. That metadata there is what Zotero has grabbed in good faith, but it has gone wrong. If we look over here, we can see in the title, it's got Music Management Bible New Revised Edition. We have to correct that manually. And at the point of harvesting, I recommend that you check your metadata guide and fix this, because then, going back to Charlotte's point, when you're citing, as you write in a hurry, you can do it with confidence. So I've just fixed that. Interestingly, Amazon have updated this, because it used to say revised edition, and I used to have to edit that in previous demonstrations as well. But now I've just fixed the title. So if we go back to our document, let's go back here. It says new revised edition. We'll just do a refresh, and bang, it's now correct. So there's an example of where we have to do stuff just to make it quick. But the thing is, once you do that once, it's there forever. Every time you want to cite it, so it's still worth the effort of doing that. It's well worth the effort. It's massively labor saving. So don't let it put you off. So other examples, because there's some other little bells and whistles we need to jump through. So let's now look at Google Scholar. Google Scholar. Let's look up a paper, electronic engineering. Reason. So here's Google Scholar, and it's found a book called Electronic Engineering. Let's just make that a little bit bigger for you. Now, Google Scholar gives you a number of ways to harvest this stuff. You can click on the PDF sometimes when it's in an open source repository. If we follow up with the Zotero link from the PDF, we might only have a link to the PDF and not to its source with all the correct metadata. We could click on this link and we could land on a publisher's website or an author's repository or a private website, or we could click on that. This is Google Scholar's particular way of grabbing a citation for us. So let's click on this and see what happens. Now here, it's giving us a few different examples. It gives us APA, which would be of interest to psychologists, or Harvard. Notice this is vanilla Harvard. It's not Cite and Write. This is vanilla Harvard. So if you paste that in, it may or it may not be right. But it gives us various formats of referencing here. Now, BibTeX is one that Zotero speaks. And if I click that, I will get a bunch of script that I can grab. There's some rather boring looking script, but all I'm going to do is select it and Command C to put that in the clipboard. Now, back in Zotero, I have an option, and you can't see this, excuse me, because it's in the top menu of my upper monitor. But under File, it has an option called Import from Clipboard. And I'm about to click that now. And it is now importing that BibTeX data, and there is the book Electronic Engineering. And you can see what Google Scholar has very helpfully done. It's given us the fact it's a book, its title, a couple of authors, a publisher and a date, and that's about it. Now, those of you who know your Cite and Write will know that we also need a place. It's not enough just to have Wiley there. So here's another example of when Google, the thing that we are all tempted to trust, has not given us complete information. And unfortunately, that's often the case with Google Scholar. It gives you a quick, dirty fix. Now, Zotero will format all that into Cite and Write, so you needn't worry about the vanilla Harvard that it offered us, because BibTeX has bypassed that by drilling down into just a bunch of variables which Zotero can format. But the metadata did not have the place. It did not have the ISBN. So suddenly, we've now got a mission to go on. We've got to figure out where this publisher Wiley is based and what the ISBN of that book is. And that means, unfortunately, that we need to go back here, and we perhaps need to dig around in here. Maybe the ISBN and the publisher is all in this particular link. It's very likely that we will have, oh look, there we go, Wiley & Sons, New York, London, Sydney, and Tokyo. And we will find an ISBN. Ooh, we've gone past that. There'll be an ISBN somewhere. Anyway, you can see that in this particular very old school looking book, excuse me, talking too much, we've got a bit of work to do. So that's not ideal, but it's still worth the pain. But you see, you need to know what Cite and Write expects to understand what's missing there. It's not enough just to put your blind faith in a reference manager, unfortunately. I emphasize again, I'm highlighting shortcomings here. Very much, most of the time, it will all just work for you, and it's amazing. But I'm showing you the bear traps to watch out for. There's a couple more, I'm afraid. Here's a learning society, the Audio Engineering Society, of which I'm a member. I just need to log in here. Now, very often when you go into a journal, this is like a pay-per-view thing, the library pays for this. Here's the Journal of the Audio Engineering Society. When you go in here, we now have a whole bunch of the articles in that chapter. There's a deep learning approach to what's it, a multi-listener crosstalk what's it, etc. Now, if I just go to Zotero and grab this page, I will literally say, excuse me, something in my eye, I will literally grab a web page. I will not grab these individual articles. In fact, what I need to do is import them to BibText. Now, if I click on that link, watch this. It's saving straight into demo. Although it's using BibText, it's bypassing the manual cutting and pasting, putting it straight into Zotero, and deep learning, what's it approach to intelligent drum mixing, will go straight in here, and it's all formatted. Now there's a potential bear trap because it said J-Audio N SOC. Now it just so happens that if I went to a similar article and found that on, let's say, ResearchGate, it wouldn't abbreviate J-Audio N SOC. It would go Journal of the Audio Engineering Society. But Zotero has those two things listed as being different in its metadata. So if those two articles, or say a sister article from the same publication, appears in your reference list, you will have an anomaly in your listings. One with an abbreviated version, one with a non-abbreviated version. So that can be a bit of a problem. So you have to make executive decisions about certain publications and always use the abbreviation or not, as the case may be, regardless of where you're harvesting that metadata from. So there's another of the little bear traps that can catch people out. Here's another one. Sticking in electronic engineering, which is for no apparent reason. This lady has a number of publications on robotics, self-driving cars. Now, if I select this article, how much do you trust your self-driving car? It does sound intriguing, doesn't it? I can click on PDF, and I think that UWL subscribes to this organization, can't quite remember, but this looks hopeful. Maybe I could cite it straight away. So if I can cite this, watch what happens. I get a bog standard plain text. We don't know what referencing system that is versioned there. Or I can get a BibText version, or one straight into RefWorks if we're using RefWorks. So let's click on BibText. Now look at that very carefully. That's all the scripting metadata. And I can copy that, and I can put it into Zotero. Just going to put it in, paste it from the clipboard like I did before. This is off the window that you can see. Import from clipboard, there it comes. And have a look at that data there. So it's got a digital object identifier, that's good. It doesn't have, it says it's a conference paper, but it doesn't have a conference name, although it's got a proceedings title, which depending on your referencing style may substitute for the name. It's not the place, unfortunately. So some shortcomings. Watch this. Watch this. If we go cite this, and now instead of just copy, if I go download and go back to copy, hang on, there's more stuff there, isn't there? Isn't there more there? Let's copy that and import it again. Import from clipboard. There's some differences. Look, October 2020. Down at the bottom, we've got an ISSN, no ISSN, and neither of them have a place, unfortunately. So there we see an example of a learned society that actually has a website problem where there's a bug. Now, unless you were a sharp, astute researcher and keeping an eye on your metadata and not trusting it too blindly, you might not pick up on that. Now, it just happens that Cite and Write doesn't require us to have a month of publication, but this one does. There are certain times where you might need to cite a month. Let's now go back to this thing here. let's talk about changing the style. I told you what a nightmare it was to change your reference list from author date into numbers. In document preferences, since we were looking at the IEEE, let's go to IEEE, which I happen to know is a numbers plus square brackets one. If you've got 60 references, it will be terrible trying to migrate this. Watch how hard it is in Zotero. How about that? So when you're taking that PhD chapter and you're sending it off to the IEEE, it's one click to convert your references. Now that's pretty amazing. You've just saved yourself at least a day's work with guaranteed errors creeping in. So that's a pretty big deal, actually. So we're seeing all kinds of things. Let's dig back into Zotero. Rather than citing, let's look at some more of the ways we can manage our data. So you've seen basic searching up here. You've seen collections and so forth. But down here we have ways of tagging things. I have a tag set up here called, let's just go back to my whole library, because this has a macro search level, depending on whether you're in the greater library or a collection, or indeed there's a nested sub-collection, lots of them. Let's look for songs. And if I click songs down here in the tag menu, it gives me a suggested tag called songs. Now if I click on that, it will activate it. And guess what happens? Here we have a whole bunch of songs. Bear in mind, I'm from London College of Music. It's not like I'm cataloguing my Spotify, so I may have occasion to write about certain pieces of music. Now, these all carry the meta tag songs. But it could be that some of these songs are actually more specific. Supposing I look up 60s. Oh, look, I've got a tag for 60s. Let's activate that. The only song I've got with the meta tag 60s in it is Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. And you can see that over here I have a tag of 60s and a tag of songs associated with that. Let's cancel those. Cancelling them is a little bit tricky in Zotero. It's that funny little menu down there, and we deselect all. So let's go back to songs. Let's look at my songs. Now, what I'm going to do is say, well, Pet Sounds, yeah, so that was the Beach Boys in 1967, but that's what the Beatles were up to the year before. So these are surely related. Wouldn't it be great if we could relate them? And over here, I have a tab called Related. So when I click Related, it's going to give me another version of the Zotero database. And when I click that, I can add a source that it's related to. And in here, I can type B-E-A-C-H, B for boys. Where's the Beach Boys? There's Pet Sounds. I can click on that. And now look, Revolver is related to Pet Sounds. Although I can see Pet Sounds there, I might not be able to, but if I want to go to it, I can click there and I jump to it. Pet Sounds is related to Revolver. So I've set up a bidirectional relationship between those two things with a customizable name that is easily searchable. And you can search, excuse me, you can set up complex webs of interrelated tagging in that regard. And there's even a Zotero plugin that can form a visualization of those. You can form a PDF, looks like a spider diagram of all the sources and which and how they relate to each other. So if you invest in setting up your database appropriately, then you know, you can really unravel things later on when you get to a difficult point in your PhD. Now I'm going to show you one more thing that's really important. We are running a little bit late here, unfortunately. I need to come out of this search facility to deselect everything. I want to go here. Because remember this funny thing, Zot file. Here is a PDF. And there's a question come up. I can't see that window right now. Let me look and see what's happening question-wise. Able to work with images? Yes, you could if the image is a PDF, Charlotte. Absolutely. It only likes PDFs, but if you save the image as a PDF, then you can annotate it. Watch this. This PDF, I've elected to have it stored inside Zotero. Now, if I open it by right-clicking and going View PDF, then I could say on this thing, I could insert a comment. On PC, this would be an Acrobat Reader. On Mac, it defaults to Preview. I've got a key command for a comment there, and I could say, it's really good. Or it could be something a bit more cerebral. And then later on, next, let's say on page 13, I could say, another source of confusion is a convention which is widely used in mathematics. Now that's interesting to me, so I'm going to highlight it. If you highlighted PDFs like that, that's something I might want to cite that later on. And actually, I might also want to cite.
Hi, we can't see that. Maybe it's because it's not on the screen for us, or it's just for me at least, but maybe just to let you know.
Absolutely right. Sorry,
Thank
thanks. Straight. You're absolutely right. So I started off, sorry about that, I've got too many monitors here. I started off inserting a comment, said that looks really good. So it's just a little annotated comment. You could do an Acrobat. And I went down to this page here, and I thought that this quote looks quite good. Another source of confusion is a convention widely used in mathematics. A few pages on, that was in page 13, I think. A few pages further on, I had another one, wherever it was. Now I'm going to save this PDF. I'm saving it back into Zotero. I just hit Command S. Now look at the way Zotero is representing this. At the moment, it's still just a PDF, but right-click and manage attachments, and I can extract annotations. That's interesting. When I extract annotations, it has a think about it, and then it does something. It forms a little note called extracted annotations. And look at that. It says, this looks really good. It tells me it's a note I put on page 5. And then another source of confusion is a convention widely used in mathematics. And I can just lift that up out of there and go to my document, paste that in, my key command for Hollowigger. Spell his name right. Which one's it? There's that one. Bang. And suddenly, with a little bit of formatting, take it back to Harvard. Whoops, wrong button. Take it back to Harvard. Come on, there we go. Slightly right. Contribution. You see author's names there. There we go. So, although it's pasted the wrong font in, easily fixed, and you can see that something I'd highlighted in a PDF and was able to search, by the way, because in Zotero I could search everything for confusion. Spell it right. I was looking for something I knew had confusion in it, and there we go. There's our annotation. Oh yes, it was Hollowigger, so now I can search him. So you can see how, without knowing who Florian Hollowigger was or the fact this was mathematics, just by remembering a word, I'm able to extract a very accurate quotation, a bunch of quotations, easily paste them in with a bulletproof reference, which, look at that, it made that beautiful reference there, and organized them all, inserted them in the right place alphabetically, etc. So that facility is Zotfile. That's not generic Zotero. Right then, so back to me. So it's just about 3:30. I pressed on with all that because I really wanted to get to the point of telling you about Zotfile, because I hope you'll appreciate that was a very useful feature to hear about. I promised you that we would do some Q&A, but we're out of time. So what I propose is this. Those of you who need to go elsewhere, please go on. This recording will be made available in the usual place, webinars, those with 3 lines on the black bar in recordings, and then possibly in the future within a certain date range. Of course, remember that you need to look at the date range to access this recording. So you'll come back to this later on. But if any of you would like to stay, then I'd be very happy to take some questions right now. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say formally. So hit me with some questions if you've got any, if you want to stay. Something coming up here from Stephen. What's up?
Hi, Justin. Sorry, I forgot to unmute. This is clearly a very powerful tool. You haven't mentioned RefWorks a great deal. It's something I'm reasonably confident with now and something I use. Are you suggesting that I should perhaps ditch RefWorks in favour of Zotero?
No, I'm not. I'm absolutely not. RefWorks is great, and Stephen, if you're confident with it, that's great. There's going to be some features that it has, for instance, ebook integration that you would miss if you went onto Zotero. There's going to be some features in Zotero, maybe courtesy of some of the plugins, that you wouldn't benefit from sticking with RefWorks. The bottom line, I think, is that thing about portability. When you leave UWL, you're not going to have RefWorks anymore. It might be that it, thanks Hamad, it might be that it costs you quite a lot of money to keep that. And even if you extract your entire library as a bibtex thing out of RefWorks, which you can do, and import it into Zotero once you're out in the greater world, you can do that. But think about all those dot file type things, those annotations, those tags, those related links. You will lose all of those. So it's a decision you have to make, Stephen. Yeah.
No, that's really
Sorry,
helpful, Justin. That's really helpful and very clear. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Almenor Webster, please. My apologies if I didn't say your name correctly. Are you on mute?
Hi, Justin.
Hello.
How's it going? I just wanted to say thank you. It was very, very helpful and insightful and interesting. So not so much of a question, but more of a comment. And I think it's really important because I personally have submitted my transfer partial thesis and had spent hours diddling around with fixing references and citations and banging my head against the wall. So very, very helpful from my perspective. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. Charlotte.
Hi again. So yeah, maybe I just came a bit late on the bit about, but maybe you've answered the question in the PDF. So it's only PDFs, right?
I think so, yeah.
And so maybe you could just go through this scenario with me. So I convert, when I'm reading, sometimes I would convert a PDF into a Mobi file so I could read it on a Kindle, and then I highlight stuff in there. So that's kind of lost because it's kind of already in the Mobi, like it's taken into Mobi, and so it's not retrievable really, like back into PDF format and then into my highlight or a comment or a note, like the things that you're saying at the end. But to be honest, what I tend to do for myself is I read something in Kindle anyway, and then come back kind of into my own Evernote or something and like write my comments down separately. So I almost do that twice anyway. So what I could do is I could, sorry if this is a bit too specific. I'm just trying to think.
It's very good. It's very relevant actually.
So yeah, so let's say I've read the thing in Kindle because it was like nicer for my eyes. And then when I'm going to kind of make my notes or make comments after I've read the article, I could re-highlight in the original PDF, for example, what I highlighted in my Mobi when I was reading it. And then I could extract all of that in the Zotero. Is that right? So that could be a kind of process that I get into. That makes sense?
Yeah, you're talking about a very bespoke workflow there, and it's not a workflow that I've been familiar with. The bottom line is that if you are able to highlight a PDF and export it and keep those highlights, you'll be able to then import it in Zotero and using the Zot file, export all those individually. Whether you need to go through Evernote or OneNote or one of those things with optical character recognition in them, or Acrobat Pro is a system that I use for that, with slightly mixed results depending on the font, then that might work. But you're definitely looking at a hybridized solution for that very particular way of working. But I would say if it's something you do a lot, Charlotte, it's well worth spending a day experimenting, reading, hitting forums, and finding out how to refine that workflow. Actually, quite a bit of what I've shown you today is the result of me doing that, spending time figuring out how to make stuff happening. Not least the crazy arrangement of multiple screens and Minority Report that you saw, all happening at the same time, which is a bit of a brain buster at my end. But yeah, if you got that system, you just need to figure out the way it works. Once you understand the capabilities of each bit of that system, you'll be able to find out how they can interlink, maybe even through a further phase. And check the Zotero plugins as well. It's very common for somebody to have been there before you, and if that's a computer dude, then they might well have written a script to assist with that process. But I can't give you a direct answer to such a specific question, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. It's just working out almost psychologically as well what the workflow is in your head. Getting used to that.
Yeah. Lastly, it's very important to develop an efficient workflow. Any inefficiencies in your workflow slow you down, multiplied by n to the power of x, as you get further into your thesis and then the rest of your academic life. Getting that workflow really efficient is a very worthy investment of time, and that includes getting going with a reference manager at the beginning. It will take a while to make it happen. I was doing bish with it all, but I've been doing it for a while. When you just learn that and learning the nomenclature, not necessarily knowing what to search for, like you're talking about folders and the manual talks about collections, that kind of thing can catch you out and slow you down. So you have to expect a bit of an overhead with that, but it's well worth it, always.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry not to be of more immediate help on that. Anyone else? Okay, guys. Well, with that, I can give myself a halo. Very nice. With that, thank you all for sticking with it and listening. Thank you for the kind comments that some people have put up in the comment box. This recording will be available to peruse, and if you'd like to email me, let me just put my email address. I should have done it 8 years ago. It should be readily computable from my name. That's my email address. Notice 1 T in Patterson. So I'd be very happy with any follow-up, with that. So yes, lots of thanks pouring in. You're all very kind. That's great. We'll call a close now and see you around. Thanks, guys.